Next up is the panel, which is debating what is the biggest challenge to attract, train and retain talent in Brighton. And I'm joined here by Tom, Caro, Ed and Mariam. Caro, we've heard from already this morning, but I'm going to ask the others, starting with you, Tom, please, to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you do and why you're here.
Okay, I'm Tom. I'm from Pragmatic. We're a 55-person digital agency in Brighton. I'm the People Operations Director, which is a role that's sort of come around as we've grown quite quickly. We've sort of grown from 4 when I started 4 years ago to 55 now. And when we sort of hit about 30, we sort of realised we need to have a HR People Operations team because things started getting a bit hairy. So here I am, and I'm talking. Wanted to talk today, discuss with you guys about talent, finding people, and sort of sharing knowledge and sharing experiences on the challenges we all face.
Hi, I'm Ed. I'm from DabApps, software agency based here in Brighton. I'm the commercial director at DabApps. Previously, I've been with DabApps for around 2.5 years, and prior to that, I've worked in IT product companies where I've grown teams both here in Brighton and internationally. I'm really pleased to be here today to talk with everyone on the panel and hopefully carry on discussions afterwards to discuss really, I guess, and start the conversation around the challenges that we face in hiring, attracting, retaining talent.
Hi, I'm Mariam Crichton. I'm from Everyone Mobile. We work in international development on social impact projects, typically in Africa and emerging markets. We are the technology partner in that, and so we have a rapidly growing company of about 40 based between Brighton and Cape Town, and we've got satellite offices around Africa. But I've also spent over a decade in management and recruitment, in software, mobile, design and mapping and software as service companies in Southampton, London and Brighton.
Thank you. So this afternoon everyone here is going to participate in the workshop that we're running, but you four have got the opportunity to get your say in first, and I'd like to ask you to start with what you think the number one challenge is in attracting, retaining and training talent, and whether or not this is the same challenge across that life cycle of somebody's employment journey. Tom, do you want to kick off?
Yes, so it's a really interesting question. I think I was thinking about this long and hard, and I think that everyone we want to work with wants the same things we think, which is freedom, flexibility, autonomy, career progression, and to work within a good team. And one of the challenges we face is that you get a lot of that being a freelancer. And Brighton's got such a fantastic freelancer community, very vibrant, lots of people working together on collaborative projects, and there's some really good shared working spaces, so it really encourages the freelance lifestyle, and it's a good one. So our challenge as an agency is to work out how we can offer those benefits, lifestyle, good things that you can get from being a freelancer as an agency. So we look at things like remote working, flexible working, showing people that you can have autonomy over your day-to-day work. So all those things you can get as a freelancer, try and get those into the agency.
So how successful are you at doing that? Because that's about how you attract people to come to work for Pragmatic, yeah? Yeah,
I guess, so we often attract freelancers who we then try and show that we can offer that as a full-time employee.
So they work for you first as a freelancer? Sometimes,
yes. And often that's the sort of the lure in, and then we show them how good we are and how amazing it is to work there, and then hopefully sell them a dream. But then also then keep that dream going, obviously, as part of the retention stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Is that the problem that other people have experienced as well in attracting?
Yeah, I think specifically for us, I think a big challenge is attracting kind of senior or kind of mid-level experienced developers primarily. I think, as Tom said, There's a lot of freelancers in Brighton. I was at the jobs fair yesterday, and I got a lot of CVs from graphic designers in freelance, and not so many from developers, basically, which are the positions that we have open. So I think, attracting senior talent, part of that problem is that some of those people are freelance, and therefore trying to get them out of freelance if they've been doing it successfully for some time is a challenge. But also just the size of the talent pool available somewhere like Brighton, where you've got a lot of growth businesses. We're a growth business, and the speed at which we can grow as a business is basically sometimes held back by how quickly we can bring on board that talent and those positions. And we're probably all going to mention people moving away and being drawn to other places where they can potentially earn more money, like London. That's also a factor, but I think the talent pool here at that mid and experienced level needs to grow somehow as well.
Mariam, I saw you nodding enthusiastically, thinking about what bit of what Ed said most resonates.
I think attracting seniors is a challenge. It's a different challenge to it's a different challenge to retaining juniors and mid-level, but attracting seniors, because a mobile developer can earn up to 70k in Brighton, but in London it's 100k plus. And it's only really if a senior person has completely different priorities, such as they've got small children, they need the flexibility, they want to be in Brighton, if you can find that person, will they forfeit the salary difference and stay in Brighton. But also one thing we've noticed is what does work is employing people permanently but remotely, which we've had to do for like a senior iOS developer because they're like gold dust even in London. But that isn't exactly retaining talent in Brighton exactly.
But retaining talent into your business.
Into the business that will grow the Brighton business.
And that's helped you to get over this problem of a limited pool, a limited
Yes,
size.
yes.
Okay. Cara, has your experience with Further My Future being younger, a younger organisation, has your idea about all of these challenges, is it different?
Possibly. I mean, I think to answer the second part of the question first, no, I don't think they've got the same challenge, because I think the challenge of retaining is driven by the employer, how good the employer is, and the bond between the employer and the employee. Attraction and development, I think, is a shared responsibility, and that takes a slightly more sort of community-wide approach. In addition to the talent pool, I think the other interesting thing around attraction is just the age-old methods that we use to recruit. So we put an advert out in various forms of shop windows effectively. We receive CVs or applications, we review them, and then we invite people in for interviews. I know I'm speaking very broadly. Other models do exist, but predominantly that's the model. I think the other attraction issue is about the vocabulary we use in organisations, what we call roles, the roles that we refer to, and the roles that obviously, I'm going to start talking about young people again, I'll shut up in a minute, but the names of the roles that we refer to in careers guidance sessions or in schools and colleges, I think there's a bit of a disconnect between the two. And so for young people, how can you choose to be something that you've never heard of? You can't. So I think there's an attraction issue there.
Yeah, so it's interesting because all three people mentioned the different challenges depending on the experience that you're looking for. And obviously you were talking this morning about youth ageism and whether or not we assume we need experience for a role as our entry point, rather than thinking, is this something that could be done? But I'm guessing in these technical roles that you're trying to hire into, you need people to know what they're doing in a certain way. Is that right?
Yeah. I think you do. You need in technical roles. That's obviously very important, and I think ideally you need a blend of people, and you need a kind of diverse set of people.
Have you found, Mariam was talking about offering really flexible working arrangements so that she can break out of the restrictions of the Brighton pool. it says retaining talent in Brighton, but I think it's meaning retaining talent for the organisations who work in Brighton. Has anybody had any success in going much further afield, so keeping the talent within our organisations, but from outside of the city? What challenges does that present?
So we've literally just opened an office in Cardiff, mentioning other cities and going on about them constantly, but I mentioned Cardiff, so I'll say it again. And we've just opened a small office there, and we've hired a couple of people pretty quickly, and that helps us as a business continue to grow, so it helps us continue to be successful here in Brighton, but it gives us some access to a kind of wider talent pool. And that's not the only reason we've done that. That's obviously, there's a market down there, and that helps us grow into a new market and find new customers as well. But I think for us to continue to grow at the rate we are, just relying purely on Brighton is a challenge. And that's something that we've got to address if we don't want more roles to keep moving outside of the city.
Yeah, okay.
Something we've also done in that sort of vein is offer sort of working sabbaticals. I know that sort of kind of doesn't sound right, does it? But so some people, we've got a guy in Vietnam at the moment, 2 people in Spain. They've always got the opportunity to come back. In fact, they all plan to, but we haven't sort of put an end date on that. The returns, so saying you can go for 6 months, you can go for a year, whatever works, just trying to be that little bit flexible, also making sure they know they can come back to Brighton and they've always got a desk.
Are they working whilst they're on sabbatical?
Yeah, so they're sort of taking like a month off and then working remotely for a period and seeing if they like that. If they don't, they come back. And surprisingly or not, they're all coming back. So yeah. When you're walking down the streets today, like a day like today in Brighton, it's easy to see why. Yeah,
so that's meeting this need around retention. And Carrie, you were saying that that's the employer's responsibility. Retention is about being successful in retaining your staff, your talent, is about making sure that you're providing an environment where people want to stay. Is that right? Did I get that right?
I think so, and I've been able to do that well and do it really not well. Have people stay, people leave, and I think there's an interesting thing about we talk about experience and we talk about the salary, and I've interviewed people from my previous company coming in for super tech roles from London who said, yeah, I just fancy coasting by the coast. Coasting by the coast was a thing. They didn't get the job, so it's say it. But I think that there's also in terms of retention, what I've learned, and it's taken a while, is the connection I think a lot of employees have beyond the skills and the experience they're bringing to the job and the salary, but also about the purpose and the vision of the organisation. And I think that things like flexible working, absolutely great. We should be more flexible, but that's slightly different, I think, to an organisation that has purpose, or somebody within an organisation that has purpose. There's a lot of times, there's a quote, isn't there, about people leaving. People don't leave jobs; they leave managers. And as I say, I've had people leave me. But it's true. I think that if you've got an organisation that's very clear about what it wants to do, where communication is great and there's transparency within it, you've got good management within it, then that matters, and that matters as much as what everybody is doing and what everybody's being paid.
Mariam?
Yes, I think the biggest challenge is not creating great cultures. I think it's salary, because Brighton being close to London means you're constantly competing with either commuting or going to London, and juniors can almost double their salary by making a move to London. Mid-level people can get up to a third more, and when people want to go to the next career level progression, or when you're younger, money counts. I've worked in an organisation, I worked for Rebo for a couple of years, mobile agency design. We had the most amazing culture. It was super fun every day. We danced on tables, flexible working hours. We ate together. We started off at breakfast on Monday morning, finished with a beer on Friday. It couldn't be better. And everybody loved the culture. And everybody said we've come for the culture. And it was known for its Rebo days, its research and development days. But no matter how perfect a culture you created, I still had developers who were beginning mid-level going, I want a pay rise, I could earn so much more in London. And then after about 2 years, you're lucky if you keep them for 3 years, because they've never tried it, they make the move to London. In fact, what happened after a while is most of them left to London. And it's a false impression, because once you do go to London, people suddenly realise, of course, you're working all hours, it's difficult working conditions, and they get the money, but they don't get the culture. But it feels like the culture thing will work for a limited amount of time, but if you are junior or lower mid-level, they still want that salary boost. And once they've got their salaries double, then they can maybe come back and have choice and say, hey, but now I'm on double my salary, I'll come back, but that's what my normal rate is. And I find the biggest challenge to be salary. And talking to headhunters, one headhunter described Brighton as a vicious market, because typically employees are not willing to negotiate £1,000 or £2,000 a year for mid-level or junior level salaries. Like, no, this is a salary, that's it. But people who are attracted will turn it down, even though they really want to work in Brighton, just for nothing, just for a couple of thousand. So I would say, if people want a small amount extra, give it to them.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Nobody mentioned training. It struck me when you were talking about the challenge of converting freelancers into employees. The one thing that you can do as an employer is offer training, which freelancers would have to fund themselves. How important do you think development and training is in people's, I suppose, in retention, really? Matt?
I was really pleased to hear the story of from Copar, because yesterday we had our second female developer start, which was great for us, and she was being trained by someone from Copar, who came from Copar, and I think that sort of passing it down effect and making people who've gone through it, asking people process and show the people who are coming in, this is where I am now. A year later, Georgia, the developer who's training these people up, they were freelancers. They've come on board as full-time staff now because of Georgia's mentoring. So that was like a sly tactic. We sort of showed them a little bit of what they could get, and now they've come on board as sort of full-time staff.
And have you got formal training? Is it a formal part of what you offer to employees?
Yes, we try and steer clear of, and I'm sure there's some sort of training providers here, so I don't want to sort of badmouth it too much, but sort of really expensive day sessions, because it's really good for a day, and then you come back maybe 2 days afterwards, you're really inspired. A week later, you're kind of still doing some of the stuff, and then a month later, you might slip back into old habits. So we try and do sort of much more sort of consistent mentoring, buddying. There's time set aside every week for everyone to be a mentor, and it has much better effects. We had people talking at a recent conference about their experiences of our training and that mentoring. It does seem it's the best way, and it might seem like quite a loss to the bottom line, because you're taking senior developers out of billable projects, but actually in terms of what you're spending on training, if you're not doing it internally, it often works out much the same.
Have you found the same, Ed? Is that?
Yeah, I think that, the challenge is with training. We train and develop pretty much most of the people that we bring on board. It's not necessarily a kind of formal training program, but people spend a lot of time mentoring and training other staff when they join. I think one of the big challenges is, if you're constantly bringing in people at the junior level, is that when people do move on, you're putting a lot of kind of pressure on those junior people to step up and mentor quite soon into their career. So that again goes back to having the blend of kind of mid and more experienced level people coming in as well to mix it up and take some of that pressure away. But I think it's really important in terms of retaining, obviously, having that path for people when they come in, because often, being able to show a developer who just wants to get on and do their job, a path for them to develop their career and not just necessarily give them a route to earn more money is quite important as well. So that's something that we're looking at, is how we can be better at doing that, and creating a path for people when they join, so that they you know, they may be looking at developing within the company rather than going somewhere else.
Yeah, so they can see where they're going.
Exactly.
So I was struck in Chloe's talk this morning that the university that she'd spoken to had said that the course would be out of date by the time she'd finished it. Do you think, and it links in with the idea about what training we deliver in-house, what role do you think educators in the city have in making sure that the young people who can be entry-level talent
Our businesses are ready and have had experiences which are appropriate to the role that we need them for?
Mariam, do you want to start with that?
Well, I think with the whole thing about training, again, in my experience with working with developers and designers, they don't usually want to go on any kind of formal training course at all. They kind of learn by the meetups, that Brighton has lots of meetups that are very specialist, or they learn by companies offering 1 day a month R&D where they get to work on their own project and they're learning what they want to on the fly. That's very effective. But what I've found with the issues with this is that while they're informal, they aren't frequent enough, the meetings, or there aren't enough topics covered, wide range of topics covered, and we don't attract the best speakers. We need to be attracting the world's best in the fields we want to speak on to get big numbers. And what I was talking to some developers and freelancers as well, and they were saying that in London you've got every meetup you can think of, so many talks, it's so inspiring, and you learn. That's how they learn, because technology, whatever you have learned in the next year, it will be outdated in 2 years. So keeping fresh is just in their own time. They're usually so enthusiastic and passionate. They are willing to go in their own time. And the problem we have in Brighton is that this happens all the time. In my company, like, oh great, it's an IC for Dev, International Development Talk, London. I'm going to go this evening. The trains don't work. Oh, I missed it. And so there's, getting to London, coming back in your own time. But I think having more, not formal, but perhaps Brighton coming together to provide more talks and learning it out of hours, and getting inspiring speakers to come, and attracting people from London to come to Brighton the other way around would be a great way for people to think, oh yeah, there's lots happening in Brighton. It'll be good publicity for Brighton.
And is that something you think that the educators could take on together with the employers, so driving what that information and what that learning needs to look like?
I think so. I think that's the way going forward, and cross sectors coming together, because quite often it's not just developers going to a Android developer meetup. They want to learn about designers. They want to learn about a whole range of things to inform their work. So it's about different sectors coming together, working as a group, but in Brighton, a sort of organisation where somebody's coordinating it properly and bringing these people together properly, a dedicated group. Otherwise things don't happen, and it just doesn't happen. It's all kind of sporadic and not coordinated.
Caro, have you got a view about the relationship between employers and educators?
I think the training aspect is twofold. I think there's training that is required in order for you to come in and do a job, and there is training that is ongoing, continuous professional development. And I think that as an employer, if you are either paying for somebody to be trained, either because you're sending them on a day-long course, or because you're giving them day release to go to a college or a training provider that is offering that training, for me, the training should be good enough that candidate is bringing something back into the employer that they otherwise wouldn't have got. It has to be a two-way thing, and this is why I think some employers have an issue with bringing in junior talent, because it feels a drain. There's too much. So that's the first thing, and I think there is something for educators and employers to be working together to make sure that actually the example of the university person saying actually the course is outdated doesn't happen. It shouldn't be happening. Then there's a question of how do you continually evolve and train the staff that you have, and I think that is a big factor in retention, and whether that's informal by dev meetups, moving it away from just purely tech. You know, it can be as simple as constructive sort of feedback. Feedback is something that I've become increasingly aware of that's important, not just my feedback to my team, but their feedback critically about, you know, to me as well. So I think there's informal training and mentoring that should be ongoing once you are proficient in your role, but to get to that proficiency, educators and employers should be making sure that actually they're bringing ideas into your business as well.
Yeah. Tom?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think I'm lucky enough also to look after our educational outreach programme, Pragmatic, and I work with universities. We're doing a knowledge transfer partnership with the University of Brighton, which if you haven't looked into a KTP, they're fantastic. You get a recent graduate to come and work with you for a number of years with academic support, so you're encouraging that two-way flow of information between business and education, which hopefully tries to stop the whole we're a year behind syndrome. Also working with schools. Schools are crying out for businesses to go in and provide one-off training or some setting briefs for projects. We did that with, I think it was Blackshington Mill School. We set a brief for a project and came back 6 months, not 6 years, that'd be a long project, 6 months later and marked it and saw what the kids were up to. And it was, you know, a little bit depressing that they were still using Dreamweaver that was 15 years old to build something that we could have shown how to build in WordPress, you know, in probably a day. So it was, you know, had we been involved in that project on an ongoing basis, we could have helped steer it a bit more. And I think as a tech community, we can help guide the curriculum that's being taught to the children.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anyone. Is there anyone here from the education department? Is there someone from Brighton Hove City Council from? No. Maybe we can send them that feedback afterwards, that we can work with the local employers to make sure the curriculum is more relevant. Yeah, okay. What Eugenie was talking this morning about, she was talking about inclusion, Uber being a driving force. I was going to ask that question, but it feels like quite a big question to ask if we're supposed to be wrapping up. Is there anything that anyone's got burning that they want to say? Can't wait till this afternoon.
I'd like to say something. I think with inclusion, when we're recruiting, we've got to be very important with how we word job descriptions, because a lot of the time in technology, you know, the management team are men, and I walk into agencies, not a single female developer. I talk to lots of CEOs in London. I'm like, oh, we've got cultural problems. I'm like, you haven't got a single female in your entire company, 16. And I think the way we word job descriptions is very important. A job description had to pass me at a mobile agency, and I looked at it, and it was like asking, do you want to come and write sexy code? I'm like, oh my God, that is just going to totally put off young women. You know, we don't want to write sexy code. And I thought, is this just Mariam being really feminist? I better test it with somebody else, you know. Then I asked the one female developer that I hired to check it for me. I said, oh, you know, Jem, what do you think? I didn't say anything. Just what do you think is job description? I think I feel like changing it. And she picked up, oh, they've asked for a wizard, so they've obviously asked for a man, and I didn't even pick up on that. And it's just little things like that. You know, you don't realise what an effect it has on young women. It's really sad that I've attended lots of meetups with women in tech, and I just cannot believe the problems that young women are still facing today with sexism in the workplace. People think it's safer to work in techie companies, but it isn't.
Okay, interesting. So I'm sure that we'll come back to that this afternoon. So lots of the ideas that we've started talking about this morning. So I'm going to wrap up now. Before we have lunch, we're going to be joined by Chris Ricketts, Rob Verhoel and John Hume, who are going to talk about why it's all about culture. Interesting, having heard that maybe some people think it's not. So we'll just move along.